So a little bit of background on this one. We had a PowerPoint presentation put together that was really nice, and we looked over it and we decided, that quite doesn't meet what we want to do. And this week has been a little hectic, so we're actually just going to be having a face-to-face conversation and then sharing some websites and resources with you. Kelly, would you like to say anything before we start?
Just that I know that as teachers, lots of times, or at least in my case, it was really hard to get materials and things that I needed. And part of what we're presenting here is completely free, but also to provide a really good framework for how to teach some very hard subjects, how to approach them. And that's what I wanted to say.
Alrighty, so I'm going to give a kind of overview. I kind of take Paula Prober's position that I am I'm much more of a storyteller and an anecdotal person than a data person. But there is data to back up what I'm saying, and I'm more than happy to share that with anybody who wants it. One of the things that kind of guides my entire teaching philosophy in terms of equity and culture in the classroom is my own experiences as a middle schooler, right? The first time I ever read a book featuring a gay character was It, right? And that gay character is killed off in the first couple pages. None of the media that I had, none of the books that I read represented me, right? Had a version of me that I could relate to. And since that point, I've come to the idea that our students deserve representation. And by teaching, we are actively engaging in a form of advocacy. We can either be advocating that the world is a large place where people can be represented in all of their identities and all of who they are, or we can be advocating for a small world that only has room for a few people. And I think that most of us in here, all of us in here, agree that it is much better to present that large world. So in terms of thinking about teaching and advocacy, the very act of selection of texts, of ideas, of topics is a form of advocacy. Now, that applies to the general ed classroom. So you might be asking yourself, well, what does this have to do with gifted kids? One of the things we know about gifted kids is that they come to us with a very, very strong sense of morality, right? They have a belief that they know what is right and what is wrong, and they want to see that created in the world. My elementary school students that I worked with in Oklahoma were all very concerned with ideas of fairness, right? My second graders demanded that things be equal, even when they couldn't be, right? Even when society was telling them no. And one of the most interesting things that I learned from my middle schoolers, or I'm sorry, from my elementary students, was our students come to us with an expectation that we know, that we can tell them how to fix things, that we can tell them how to make the world what they want it to be. And I myself have fallen short of those expectations so many times. But one of the things that I have always held on to was the parents of a 6th grade boy who called me at the end of the year and told me, "You made our son a better person." Right? So that to me is kind of the driving goal. If a kid can leave my English classroom knowing how to read, that is fantastic. That is what I want to do. But if a kid leaves my room and says, "I am better," I think about people, I think about justice, I think about equity, right? That is truly to me like that special aha moment. We've all had those as teachers. So today we're going to provide you some frameworks and resources for how to address issues of social justice within the classroom. I'm a firm believer that our students are fully capable. One of the best descriptions of how I think about teaching comes from Sherman Alexie. And the man was and is a predator. But I think that this statement here is true. He was asked, why does he write the things that he writes? these stories about violence and poverty and alcoholism and negativity. Like, why doesn't he present the reservation as a positive place? And he said, I write in blood because our children bleed. Our children come to school as middle schoolers pregnant, having been assaulted, having known hunger. So what does it matter if I acknowledge those things? I acknowledge those things because they're our children's lived lives. So for me, I think allowing our students an outlet to engage in equity actions and social justice and community building is absolutely necessary, because for too long, too many of our students have been told, you don't have a voice, you don't matter. And I think that our ultimate goal should be to help our students speak, right? They know what to say. They have those emotions already. They have those thoughts already. They just don't think anybody is listening. So by providing a space in our classroom for these discussions, for the encouragement of action, right? I firmly believe that we can truly be transformative in the way that our students think about what they are capable of. So when I moved into Gallup, I was told a saying, which I hate with a burning passion. I was told not to expect much from my kids because this is Gallup. I've been told not to expect much from my school because this is Gallup. I've been told not to expect much of Gallup because this is Gallup. It seems to me that too many people believe that our kids, particularly in my area, we are right outside the Navajo Nation. In fact, some of our schools are on the Navajo Nation, can't be gifted because they're Native. I've heard those words from teachers. That to me is unacceptable. So my goal in my classroom, and I think our goals in all of our classrooms, should be to provide that space, not just where our students feel safe, but where our students feel powerful, right? Where our students feel like they can affect that change, they have agency. Now, one of the problems with that is it's really difficult for some of us to figure out how to do that, right? I'm a cis white guy. I do not know the experiences of people of color. I do not know the experience of trans and non-binary people. So I have to do research, right? I have to go out and look for things to help me make sure that my classroom is a space for my students. So one of the difficulties I had moving out here was knowing what literature to select, right? I have a classroom library, and I'm going to move my computer for a moment so you can see this. So this is my classroom library, right? All of these books I have bought, right? I have about 500 of them for my kids to pick and choose. And my goal has always been to find books that represent my kids. And one of the best tools that I have found, and I'm going to share my screen for this one, is Debbie Reese. Dr. Debbie Reese is a literature. She basically is a she analyzes books with Native characters in them, and basically says, are they good? Are they bad? Like, how should we view them? Dr. Reese is from the Nambi Pueblo, and this American Indians and Children's Literature, if we go through this, right, here, S.E. Hinton had a tweet yesterday about YA novel, or about graphic novels. So Dr. Reese has written about how The Outsiders has problematic portrayals of Indigenous people, right? And we can scroll through here and we can find so many books that have problems, but also books that are recommended. So for instance, our best books, right? So this has a list of books which represent our Indigenous students and are really meant to highlight these novels which show our children who they are in the fullness of their being. And one of the things that I have learned from this is particular books that I thought were okay aren't, right? There are significant issues with Walk Two Moons. There is significant issues with reaching spirit bear, right? And one of the things we must be aware of is these books that we held and still hold to be good texts for our kids aren't. This has led to one of the biggest fights I've had with my district. My district in the school that I teach in liked to teach the education of Little Tree. Okay. And if in New Mexico, nobody seems to have an issue with that, because the nation that it talks about, the Cherokee Nation, isn't based in New Mexico. The Miseducation of Little Tree was written by George Wallace's speechwriter pretending to be a Cherokee man, right? So we need to know these things. We need to do our research about the books that we present, the stories that we tell. And in terms of Indigenous writers, Debbie Reese's website is second to none. That being said, how can you create lesson plans that effectively address the social justice concerns of our students? And for that, I'm going to turn it over to Kelly. Kelly has a fantastic resource which she's going to share with us.
Sure. And, you know, I wanted to make sure that we were looking at something, and I've used this for a couple of years. I'm going to start over on that rambling intro. And I actually got to be on the pilot program when I worked in Gallup with Jeffrey, and he brought this to my attention. And I'm going to go ahead and share screen for a minute, and I'm just going to walk you through this. Usually you can get these people to come and do a training, but 3 days long. So we're going to squish this really fast, and I'm just going to review a little bit about what this is. I think it's really nice to have this framework. And when I was just listening to Jeffrey's keynote also, I thought, you know, I'm not sure about the Native American representation in this. Teaching Tolerance was developed by the Southern Poverty Law Center, and it's completely free. And it's got a lot of really, really good tools. But then I thought, yeah, really, there is a lot more about Black culture, about Black needs, about issues that revolve around Black people. So I looked up, and I was able to find several really decent texts that applied to our Native American students as well. So I think that's a good place to start. But I suspect we have a lot of work to do. So I'm going to share screen with that right there. And oh, it's not going to let me switch over. I did something silly. I'm sorry, just 1 second, guys. It won't let me move my, okay, pause share. Oh, for heaven's sakes. Okay, y'all can laugh if you need to. I would understand.
So one of the things you can do is if you want to pull up your web browser and go to tolerance.org, that is one of the websites that we're going to be looking at. And I'll put that in chat.
Yeah, and now you guys know what I was searching for online. I can't believe that I'm doing it this way.
Hit the tab.
There we go, right there. I got it.
And Kelly, I would be surprised. I would be surprised if not every single person in this room has had some sort of technical difficulty so far this school year. So I think we can all kind of give you a little bit of grace.
Okay, thank you so much, Corey. You bet. So this is the Teach Tolerance website. It has an about page and all of that. What I want to suggest to everybody
Ellie,
is, yeah?
Let me interrupt really quick, just because I think your sharing is still paused. I'm still seeing thebrownbookshelf.com.
Okay, I unpaused. Did that help?
Now you're not presenting anything. So go ahead and try resharing again.
Do you want me to throw it up, Kelly? And I can just follow along as you talk?
Let me just try one more time.
Okay.
Share screen. There we go. Okay, can everybody see this? Did I make it? Woo! Okay.
Yes.
So I'm just going to go through this a little bit so that you can see. As you can see, it was developed by the Center for Southern Law and Poverty because that's an issue. And it had a really good quote here that I think it's important to think about, and that what we've been talking about throughout our whole conference is tolerance is an imperfect term, but we don't have a single word that embraces that broad range of skills we need to live together peacefully. So I'm really hoping that we aim towards that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go backwards. I really want to get to the classroom resources, but I want to show you all how it works first. So I'm just going to show, when you go to this, I would suggest that you go ahead and create an account. It will just take your email and a password, but then you can save everything you need, and they never sell your stuff, and you never get unwanted emails or anything like that out of it. It has 4 times a year magazine that they set out, and it has some fantastic topics on how to deal with these very hard things. So I'm just going to scroll down through here. Here's the last issue right now. It also has all the articles that they've ever published, and you can find those things. And I think that's an important thing, including podcasts. Featured publication, go to, and you can see all the special publications. So as a website, this is, it's got a lot of content, but it's pretty easy to go through. And I think having each of these things, and several of these we have as door prizes. So if you look on where all the door prizes are, you may have gotten a bundle of these in hardback form, but you can download any of these for free in digital form. They do have some options for professional development. Right now, everything they're doing by Zoom is all the workshops are only $15 a piece, and I think that's really affordable, but they are all used up. They are full because I have been looking through those. You can go to them to request a training. They do have facilitator guides, so if you do have training, you can take that back and provide professional development at the school. The most important one is the social justice standards, and I think those are really important to be able to look through. The social justice standards are divided into 4 different sections. One is, the first one is, I'm going to get to it. Here we go. Oh, I'm sorry. I had this all queued, but that's not how we're going to do it, I guess. So the first part about the social standards is identity, a means of, a means of dealing with identity and in figuring out who you are. The second one is social justice. The third one is diversity. And the last one is a call to action. So we should be able to do each of those things. And the facilitator guide kind of helps you understand a lot of what those are. And we will go in and see some of those in just a minute if we have time. It does have some self-guided learning. And I think this is probably where most of us need to go in order to make sure that we have everything that we need to address this appropriately with our kids. So we've got lots of instructional resources. I'll just click on that real quick so you can see how the resources are organized. So you have all sorts of professional development topics and resources to be able to read. All of these are free and downloadable into PDF format. They have webinars available, and they have podcasts available that you can go to and see. Boy, my computer is going slow too. So anytime you are thinking, I think there's something going on here, I better dive deep and figure out exactly what I need to do to make sure that my kids have all the information that they need to make good choices. That's a really good place to go. And I'm going to hop over to the classroom resources. Oh, I just remembered, I'm sorry. I'm going to look at frameworks really quick because that's the social justice framework I wanted to talk about. So the social justice standards broken down into those 4 areas have standards, but then they also have anchor standards. So the first ones in identity, being able to develop those positive social identities, that they understand language and historical and cultural knowledge, that they can recognize other people's multiple identities. And I'll let you go through that. The diversity anchor standards also go through each one of those things, and so that developmentally kids are able to progress and understand each other and accept each other. The social justice anchors so that they are looking at what stereotypes are, so that they look at their own implicit bias and unfairness, so that they can evolve it as well, and that they can take action over time. So 20 anchor standards, 5 for each of those things. And then if you look in the facilitator's guide, it actually opens it up per grade level, what kind of standard should be addressed when, and it has some really good examples of that. So I'm going to go into the classroom resources. And again, I'm going to go a little bit backwards. Am I going too fast? Is everybody getting this, or do I need to slow down? If somebody wants to hop in and ask a question, just do it. They've got these beautiful PDF posters. They're 11 by 17, so it would have to be printed onto legal paper, but you can get these for your classroom easily. You can also buy them just in the store from Teach Tolerance. So I happen to love Langston Hughes, and we can have Spanish. Now, I'm not seeing a lot of as much from Native America as I would really like to see, but they're working on it. I'm going to go back here from the posters. Come on, guy. All the way up. Mix It Up is a nationwide day. You can choose what day you want to participate at your school, but students go ahead and host and register it. So they have lunch with somebody they never have, so that they are exploring relationships and understanding other people. Anybody can get one of these film kits, and it has a set of 5, I believe, so that you can in my experience, usually the school counselor has been doing a lot more through the film kits than I was able to do in my own classroom. But especially when it comes to how to be accepting of other people and reduce bullying, it's been really, really nice. You can build your own learning plan or a lesson plan. And part of what I like about being able to build the learning plan is I tend to work backwards anyway. So I have a text or a big idea that I want to use, and you can go backwards through that using the social justice standards, choosing a text, and then also choosing some student tasks, so they have some performance assessments, and it gives you some step-by-step classroom activities. So it helps to have all of that together. I'm going to do one of these at the very, very end, so I'm not going to do that right now. The other thing, especially if you have to teach content areas, right? Some of us get to do enrichment, some of us have to do content. The nice part about these teaching strategies is it pulls a lot out for you. So exploring text through read alouds, there are 9 strategies that are grade level K2. So you can, if you are ever doing a search, you can organize it and filter it according to grade level, standard, or the type of activity that you need to do. Also responding to read aloud text, because some kids have to learn how to do that. I'm going to go down into this one because this is the one that I've actually used the most. I can put a lot of other stuff together, but I want to make sure that vocabulary is really important. So when you choose a selection, you can go ahead and look at the word work. Come on, little guy, there it comes. And all you have to do is choose a source. So here are, in mine, I hope it's not on yours, but mine is overlapping because I think my stuff is too big. This sorting new vocabulary into categories, the 4-fold vocabulary. I'm going to open that up. That's one way of doing it. You can, and it tells you exactly how to go through so that kids have the opportunity to practice that vocabulary. That's going to be really important for everything. As we know, we have seen that when you take the ACT, when you do the SAT, vocabulary and understanding and understanding language is going to be really important for everybody in order to move on, take those higher classes and do more advanced work. So it's got a million jillion different activities that can work to teach vocabulary and other things. And it's 11-11. So the word work strategies from 3rd all the way up to 12th grade for close and critical thinking, different for community inquiry, which I think is really important as they start to work in groups. I'll take you back to the last page. Come on, guy. So they have student tasks and student texts, and the texts are also really important, but let me show you some of the tasks that they can do. That way you are sure that they are actively doing something that promotes engagement, but also increases their ideas of what their civic duty is, how they are going to be able to do things. So I'm just going to show you the very first one on the do something. Okay, one of the things they can do is perform a skit or monologue that brings awareness to a specific area that you've addressed. And I can save that. I'm going to click on artistic expression because it's not letting me do the other. But it does give you exactly what's supposed to be going on, how long it's going to take, and how to make it happen. So you start with your text. You are going to connect your examples, assess, connect and co-plan with colleagues. In each of these things, if it has any kind of materials that you need, there's always a hot link right in the middle of this so you can download them and use them. So, you know, we have to finalize our art and prepare for a showcase. In this potential, you know, this is completely connected to a text that they have read before, and then how to do reflection, different things to do with English language learners, and the connection to the anti-bias education that we're trying to provide. So lots of different tasks that you can look through. Like I said, I can't possibly go through them all, so I'm just going to look at one on each thing. So there's our do something for student tasks. We've looked at teaching strategies, the student texts, and this is something that I really liked, especially when we first started it. And I'm just going to pull up a text. Here's one. And I'll show you how to do a search for text. Bookmark elders. Okay, it has the images, and boy, I got on the wrong one. It is, as you're making your learning plan, when you pull a text like this, it will pull out the vocabulary that you need for either tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3. And then you can add the different activities that needed to be added. Okay, so they have about 1 million pre-made lessons already here that anybody can use. And I think that's really important to have something that's already pre-made, because sometimes you don't always have time to pull this together. So here's why local elections matter. It gives you the objectives. It provides essential questions so you can have that discussion, and then all the materials that you're going to need, the vocabulary that is already pulled out, and the different procedures that you'd want to go through. So you have a pre-made lesson plan, which when you have, 35 students that you're individualizing for, that might be really important. If you want something a little bit bigger that's more of a unit, then we would go into the learning plans that I already showed you that were a little bit more based on the standards. And they do have already all these learning plans pulled together. So when you make your own learning plan, you can either keep it private, you have that option, or you can submit it so that other people can use it as well, which I think is a very nice way to share all of this. So see how I can save this copy to my account if I want to, so I can always go back and look at it. And these start with the essential questions and give you a variety of texts and a variety of activities that you can do to use that. So an unlikely friendship. You have a multimedia activity, something that you can watch to participate in. You have the whole thing in text as well that you can hand out to students. The text-dependent questions, and this did not show it. And it tells you exactly the different types, the text type, the social domain, the social justice standard, and the complexity that's appropriate for the kids. So if I was going to, let me see, I'm going to go back into classroom resources. So I know that was not a very clear overview, but definitely an overview of what was possible, of what the different activities that you can look through and find have. And I'm going to go into my account because I did also look up the various texts that were related to Native Americans. So if you go into your own account, you can go to your bookmarks. There I go. And right under here, these are the different texts that I was able to pull that have specifically to do with Native Americans, which I thought was good because many of them have to do with other types of identities than the Native American. And I wanted to make sure in our area that we made sure that we had this. Sure, you can ask me a personal, an actual poem by a Native American. A blog post, things that are informational or literature based. And I was able to find 16 different texts available. As far as learning plans that I have saved, I did one from a very, that's K-2, just because I think that they are a little faster to go through. We have our essential questions. I would choose the text that I need, maybe two. Every brain is a little bit different. And I wanted to do a collage of concerns. So these are the three things that I would pull together to help me teach this. And if I wanted to make the plan public, I could do that. So I'm going to create a lesson plan real quick, just because I like having the, and I wanted to show how to pull out the vocabulary. So here's all the pre-made lessons that you might want to use. And I just did that once. And I'm sorry, I somehow have lost my engine that pulls out the vocabulary from that.
Hey, Kelly, what was the plan of your K2 lesson?
You beat me to it, Chris.
The K2 lesson was Why Elections Matter, was my memory.
The one that you just showed that you made?
Yeah, I can go back to my account and find it real quick. It was called, Learning Who We Are. Right, that's, yep. I believe that was the one that I just showed. What identities do I share with my family? How do I know I'm part of a group? This is about a little girl who has to go into the hospital a lot, but it's but as told through the sister's eyes, but that this child was not necessarily identified specifically because she went into the hospital all the time, right? So Clemmie's the best sister, all of the things that she does. And if you want to highlight the vocabulary terms, you can pull out tier 2, and it will go ahead and highlight those so that when you print it, you can have it involved right there, but you don't necessarily have to, right? You can also use that as a means of making a close reading where you take out so that they have blanks that they have to use. And then the next thing I would do then is go through and pick the activities that I wanted the kids to do with that. So we have Clemmie in the about every brain is a little bit different. Also multimedia has a child who deals with ADD.
Kelly, we have a quick question in the comment section. Ms. Hemingway wants to know, can I link content for students instead of printing? Is this virtual friendly?
I don't know the answer to that. I've never tried to do that because this was way before I was doing a lot of virtual learning. So I printed everything off.
I know the answer to that one.
Okay, Chris, take it.
If you scroll down just a little bit, Kelly, if you look on the left-hand side of the screen, there is the share button. So if you email this stuff to yourself, you can then post it virtually online. Because part of what they allow you to do is do sort of specific instructions for your students for some of the activities. So they allow you to share it in case you want to make changes.
Yeah, and I have, especially towards the end of last year when I was still working, just downloaded, everything can be downloaded as a PDF version, and then you can upload that any place else that you need as well. Okay, did anybody else want to see anything else about the learning plan? The worst ever. Any other ideas about classroom resources?
Barbara Erickson is offering that we can also use the snipping tool for the subject that we were just speaking about.
Yep, that makes really good sense.
Thank you, Barbara.
Especially since we have had a lot about teaching hard history. I think these two, they've got two different publications. One is for K through 5 and the other 6 through 12. And because it is such a, it is a hard and delicate topic, that I think it's really nice to have access to this. And again, this is, we have hard copies going out as door prizes a little bit later, but I would absolutely download the digital one if you need to, just so you have it. Critical practices, also a downloadable guide. Digital literacy, which I think is really important in an era of fake news, and teaching how to be proactive and part of the movement. This all aligns, and I don't know, I know in New Mexico, we're not so much trying to align everything with Common Core standards, but this absolutely does connect to all of that. So you're assured of the rigor.
And Kelly, we have a question from the lady who's responsible for getting me into the gifted realm. Ursula Kelly is asking, how is the political content received in Farmington?
Well, I'm not in Farmington. I was working in grants, so I don't have a big answer for that, Ursula. You might have to ask somebody a little bit more local. Is anybody out there still working in Farmington? I did use this. I was teaching on the Laguna and Acoma res in grants and had a lot of Native American students as well. They liked all of this, actually. Anything I could throw at them, they were pretty happy to be able to read. When I worked in Gallup, I did a lot more language arts, and because the kids had never come across those primary resources as much, 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, it was a little more of a challenge for them. But that's kind of what I like, is to make sure they get challenged. Do you have any ideas about that, Chris?
So I've used this in Oklahoma, and Oklahoma is exceedingly more conservative in its outlook than New Mexico is. And for the most part, I didn't have any parent pushback. The parents who did want to know what we were teaching, like asked to look at the specific documents, and then I would walk them through what we were doing. And kind of once it was realized that like I'm not trying to turn your child into a Marxist, they were like, okay, that's fine. So the ones that tend to be most controversial are the lessons on gender and sexuality. So I think that's going to have to be, I find those particularly meaningful and useful, and I know some of my students have, but that is going to have to be a, you know your kids, you kind of know their parents and your community.
Yeah.
Thank you both. We also have another question. Did you have something else to add to that, Kelly?
No, I was just wishing that we had had time to go through this just a little bit more thoroughly. But like I said, you can't put 3 days into an hour. It just doesn't work that way.
Fair enough. I think we've all been there. We have a question from Marin asking, will you be touching on the website rethinkingschools.org?
Chris, were you going to go look at that one?
I have actually not heard of that resource, and I'm super excited to explore that one.
Want me to try to go to it real quick? Rethinking
schools.org. Yeah, let's look at that one.
Book?
No, not a book. It's a website.
Yeah, caught that.
Oh, Marin, thank you for as I tell my students, if I say your name wrong, please let me know. So thank you for doing that.
Okay, Rethinking Schools, how Google Classroom erases trans student. So this seems very timely, doesn't it?
So it looks like it has some of the same kind of resources and content, at least. I am super excited to explore this one a little bit further.
Submission guidelines, institutional site license, that might be nice. Is this something that we have to, obviously we have to create a login. Is it all free, Marin?
Marin. So she said it's really good, not quite as easy to create lessons, but a really good resource. And there are more resources for Native American concerns.
Very cool.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if it's, there are definitely lots of books you can buy, which are not free, but they have free lessons as well. And I'm trying to figure out where I got those. Maybe it's when you have to log in and, you know, create a login, kind of like you said with teaching with tolerance.org as well.
Sure. And it says
there are a lot of free resources as well.
Okay, and this has been temporarily disabled, so we will probably just have to look through it, but it looks like it's got some beautiful books.
Yeah, someone just gave me the Teaching for Black Lives book, a friend of mine in Seattle, and it's really great. It's short articles and things, but they have a lot of, as I said, you know, lesson plans as well, I believe. I'm going to try to find what I was talking about. I have that rhythm and resistance one too, which is very good.
Okay, this looks beautiful. Oh, and math. And, you know, I think that's where it's hardest to connect a lot of this is through math. And math, admittedly, tends to be its own language, but obviously we have some here, and there are some connections for mathematics in the teaching tolerance as well.
Well, I would think you could also use, say, statistics, some of the ones we've been looking at, to do some math work, you know.
That makes good sense. And, you know, in the school system I just left, they were doing Eureka math a lot until I kind of had a headache from it. But what did occur to me is, especially if we're talking about census, if we are talking about voting, I don't see why that wouldn't connect completely, especially as sixth graders are starting to go into ratios and those types of things to understand. I mean, even just the data we have on the coronavirus is really hard to unpack sometimes, but mathematically it should fit right into where our kids are, right? We should be able to help them unpack and understand that. And I think we can do that with these resources and the current math curriculum that they have as well.
Kelly, we have, oh, I just lost it. Katrina asked, it keeps scrolling. Every time I get to Katrina's question, it scrolls down on me again. It just did it again. Sorry, folks.
I can go ahead and take that one for you.
Thank you, Chris.
She was trying to answer Helen's question about online news resources for elementary school students. The Scholastic is pretty good, and Times for Kids is pretty good, but that is also, both of those are subscription based. It looks like we have some resources that are being listed. Also, Katrina, yes, we can put together a list of all the resources and get that sent out as well. Kelly, do you mind if I take over for just a second so that I can show the two lessons? All right, so I have two activities that I have tied in with some tolerance.org activities. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to tell you about one and then we're going to do the other. Okay, so first off, I did some quick exploring. There are lessons, if you use the search tool here, that are created by, it looks like, New Mexico teachers that are about New Mexico. So like this one here is about how the Pueblo Revolution shaped New Mexico's cultural identity. And then I think there's one more, right? So this one is less specific, but it focuses more on the concepts of indigeneity and indigenous studies for high schoolers. So one of my favorite activities that they do here, and let's see if I can't find the assignment, is essentially it is a community service project. And I did this last year with my middle school gifted kids, and it turned out fantastic. So this service learning plan right here, I think, is the one that I used. So basically, the idea here is that the students research a problem that is in their community that they can take immediate action on, and then they go and take that action. So that is definitely something that is new for a lot of our students, is being able to do those sorts of things. And one of the things I found is that the projects they selected were not the ones I expected. We had several students choose to work with animals, but we also had several students work in advocacy to try and get funding for water lines to be run to some of our more rural students in our more rural communities in the district. We had students talking about internet access pre-COVID, right? So even before digital education was a thing, they were thinking of these problems that they see in their everyday life, and they wanted to do something about. Like I said earlier, I'm a big proponent of giving kids the ability to make a difference where they want to. So that sort of hands-on activity was really great to see, and Teach Tolerance has a really good core collection of those sort of activities. We were talking about the podcasts earlier. So if you click on the podcast button here, you have Teaching Hard History, Queer America, The Mind Online, right? So each one of these are really good resources in terms of how to be a better teacher for your students, particularly for students whose identities you don't have. So I know we've talked a lot about a lot of information, but one of the things I like about the Teach Tolerance curriculum is that there's lots of ways to add to it. It is definitely not such a closed curriculum that you cannot add new materials or additions. So I'm going to walk you through one of my favorite assignments that I've ever done. I did this with an AP US history class that I taught while in Oklahoma, and we're going to play some music. So I actually need to stop sharing my screen and come back and reshare it so you can hear. So we're just going to listen to the first verse of "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised" by Gil Scott Heron. And then I'll explain how I used this.
You will not be able to stay home, brother. You will not be able to plug in, turn on, and cop out. You will not be able to lose yourself on Skag and skip out for beer during commercials because the revolution will not be televised. will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by Xerox in 4 parts without commercial interruptions. The revolution will not show you pictures of Nixon blowing a bugle and leading a charge by John Mitchell, General Abrams, and Spyro Agnew to eat hog maws confiscated from a Harlem sanctuary.
Okay, so during this lesson, we were talking specifically about the late 1960s and the early 1970s, where there was lots of political unrest. And in particular, we were doing a unit on the Black Panthers and kind of what they represented and kind of the Black liberation movement in general. And one of the things one of my students asked me was, well, is there music? Right? He was a band, he was a student in band. He was like, well, is there music? I was like, yeah, I know some music, let's look for some music. So what I did with that song is I walked the students through step by step what each of the references were, right? So what is a Harlem sanctuary? What are hog maws? What is Nixon, and what is that whole line about him blowing a bugle, right? So we worked through that, and once the students got kind of what the song was about, I turned them free to write their own version. I said, pick any subject, any topic, any social justice topic you want to, that you are dealing with in your community, and write. And I was astonished. I had amazing works about indigenous relations in Oklahoma. I had amazing work about poverty. I had amazing work where students were taking their own lived experiences. What was interesting, though, was the one universal phrase. It was no longer the revolution will not be televised. It was the revolution won't be tweeted. And it was interesting to see the ways in which our students are still dealing with some of the same issues, but they're thinking about them in new and novel ways. So one of the things that I would encourage you when you're doing this type of social justice teaching, whether you're using Teach Tolerance, the Zen Project, as has been mentioned, Rethinking Schools, any of those things, don't be afraid to rely on the culture that has been built up around those, the poetry, the music, the art, because that can really inspire our students to draw connections between their own lived experiences and those of others. And that's one of the ways that I think a lot of our students feel alone. They feel like they are not the only, they feel like they are the only ones experiencing a situation. And I know from my own personal experience, moving out of my small hometown and going to college, there were other gay people. And that was an amazing, mind-blowing experience that I had as an 18-year-old. And looking back, it's kind of sad that it took 18 years to have that. So my goal is, like I said earlier, always to let students see themselves reflected in our classrooms and our teaching. And I think that Teach Tolerance does a really good job doing that. I think Dr. Debbie Reese does a good job of ensuring that we have the information to allow ourselves to do that. So that is kind of my spiel, and the way that I've used some assignments from Teach Tolerance and the way that I've added on to a Teach Tolerance curriculum. So at that, I have nothing else. Kelly, do you have anything to wrap us up? You're on mute, Kelly.
I'm doing everything right today. No, there seems to be a whole lot in the chat where people are giving some additional, and I think that's great. I did see somebody mention Joan Bowler, and I have used a lot of her stuff out of Stanford before, but you know, she's a little bit on the anti-gifted side. She's published several different journal articles. It's just what, you know, and she's very much about mindsets, which I love, but I think she might be mistaken on that one. Just an opinion.
So we have about 3 to 5 minutes, so please ask whatever questions you have, share resources that you have. We really want to take this last 5 minutes to be collaborative, so please speak up and let us know what your thoughts, your feelings, what else we can do to help.
Unmute and talk to us, folks.
I'm not specifically seeing anybody on mute yet. I am seeing a lot of appreciation in the text for what you two have provided here. I think this is an area where there's a lot of stuff opening up right now. There's a lot of mindsets that are shifting, and I think that's kind of being reflected in the chat with people and their gratitude for what you guys are doing here. So thank you.
So I want to take a moment. Kim Van Gelder mentioned students surprising us. She's going to hide like she wasn't my gifted co-teacher at my school last year, and we didn't do the 6th and 7th grade civics engagement unit together. So part of what made that unit was so successful was Kim and her work on that. So shout out to her. I get to embarrass her now.
Oh, please. I think it's that we worked well together and we showed our passion with our kids. So, and we allowed them to have a voice. I feel it's important.
Yep.
So I do have a question. Baby steps. What's the first baby step on this? This is not an area of strength for myself. So how does one begin?
So for me, like I said, I grew up in a more conservative area. I had a much more conservative outlook on life until college. I had to learn what I didn't know. So part of that is, I think the podcasts are some really good resources for like, hey, did you know this? One of the things that they've talked about is most people assume the fight for LGBT rights started with Stonewall. Right, that's not true. There were gay rights groups in the 50s, right? The Daughters of Bilitis and the Mattachine Society. So just finding out what we don't know. And then once you feel comfortable with this information, you feel like you have enough to start reaching out to your students, talk to your students, ask them. Students are wonderful leaders, particularly if they're secondary, right? They can give you much more input, but ask your students, even your elementary kids, because I've done this before, what does it mean to be fair? That is an essential question to all of this work. What does it mean to be fair? And then kind of let their answers guide you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd also like to say, I think the framework, and I didn't do a good job because I couldn't find the in-depth part of it, but that framework really worked for me because I had lots of ideas floating around my head, but now I've got a good structure to fit everything in and to think about, and the language to use too. And I think that really, especially when you're working with your peers, that gets really important.
Which framework are you talking about, Helen?
I'm talking about the standards, the framework on the Teach Tolerance website.
Okay, thank you.
What other questions do we have, or comments or resources that you would like to share?
I would like to say, if you don't mind, first I want to say thank you for this. I'm a parent of an LGBTQ child who is also gifted, and would have really appreciated this during school.
Yep.
Anyways, so my question is, I teach 4th and 5th graders. Do you have any ideas, support, words of wisdom for younger students just starting out with gifted education in this?
So I've had the opportunity to teach elementary gifted students, and one of the things that I was struck by my 4th and my 5th graders, I underestimated them. I 100% underestimated them, underestimated what their interests were, underestimated the complexity of their thought. That being said, asynchronous development is a real thing, right? So I had kids who were majorly passionate about, fairness and equality and things like that, but weren't quite sure how to express that. So like I said, if you're in an area where teaching some of these things might be controversial, if you're in a classroom where you're just starting out, talk about things in the abstract first to see where your kids are. And I see that Ursula makes a fantastic point, and I absolutely love that you said this. Create an environment in which it is okay to ask quote unquote controversial questions and to talk about topics that are not brought up in their gen ed classes. Creating that safe space, that space for challenge, and that space to disagree with you, I think is really, really important, because I don't think our kids, particularly our elementary kids, get a lot of space where they can disagree with adults, and that's okay, right? So by creating that space, we can really help out. Kelly, I know you have more experience with elementary than I do.
Yeah, well, and you know, the other thing I was thinking is I like the idea, we have to do stuff not in that general ed class. I mean, I still know regular ed teachers that say, oh, you can't even hug your kids anymore, lawsuits, you can't, you know, you can't talk about religion with them, you can't, and I'm thinking, yeah, you can. It's all about freedom to express. It's freedom of religion, not from religion, that these are things that need to be discussed in a sensitive way, but absolutely, let's discuss it now. Let's send them home to talk with their parents about it, so nobody thinks we are trying to brainwash anybody. And then let's bring whatever they have at home back into that conversation to add depth to it. Yeah, and you know, I taught both gifted and self-contained special ed simultaneously for the past several years, which was a little bit of a challenge, but even the special ed kids want to get in on these ideas, on these discussions. And so it's not just for our gifted kids, it's for every kid in the world needs the opportunity to have that safe place to discuss these very controversial things so that they can find their place in the world too.
Well said, both of you. Thank you guys so much for doing this. Everybody, thank you for being a part of this conversation.